Because if you're on YouTube, its algorithm for shorts keeps flooding you with all the content. Literally keeps me up at night.
Shorts is just a challenge is when it gets into a heavy consumption. So kids' developing brain is always more susceptible. And so that's why at YouTube, we've created these things. Says set to 0 minutes, turns it off completely. So one of the things I always say to parents is
네, 안녕하세요. 전 세계 리더들의 지혜를 깊이 있게 들어보는 시간 글로벌 초대석입니다. 자, 오늘은요. 세계 최고의 기업 구글의 임원이자 유튜브 헬스의 책임자이신 가스 그레이엄 박사님을 모셨습니다. 안녕하세요.
Hi, I'm Garth Graham, and I'm so excited to be here with you all at 지식인사이드.
In Korea, average Korean spends about 2.5 hours every day on YouTube. Did you know that beforehand? Or
I did. I was always aware that YouTube is a big part of Korean life. And that's why, we have a lot of teams and people who work here.
제가 구글이랑 유튜브를 굉장히 많이 보는데 구글 헬스라는 아예 다른 전문 팀이 있다는 건 오늘 처음 알았어요. 구글 헬스, 유튜브 헬스는 정확히 어떤 일을 하고 있나요?
And our goal always primarily is around certainly getting high quality health information to individuals. But again, tackling misinformation is important, particularly when that misinformation is harmful.
Right. I'm going to try to lighten up the conversation a little bit. What is one unexpected perk that came with your YouTube job?
Well, it's more shocking in a positive way. Let me put it this way. I worked a lot on COVID-related issues during COVID at YouTube. And we worked with a lot of musicians and people around the world. And to me, it was heartening because I love music and interacting with a lot of musicians that I love. And they were just, a lot of them were so humble. So I think I was shocked at the humility. So I think one of the most positive things for me has been in a variety of different ways with different people. I'm realizing the humanity of people, but also being to interact with people who I admire. The perk about YouTube is actually just being there and being a part of the overall process, which I love.
혹시 유튜브 프리미엄을 구독료를 내시나요? 저희처럼.
I end up paying the subscription.
Oh, no.
Fee. Yeah.
You should talk to somebody.
I know. I need to talk to somebody like a managing director. That's right.
유튜브 알고리즘을 보고 한 사람을 좀 많이 알 수 있다고 생각을 하거든요. 우리 박사님의 유튜브 알고리즘은 어떤 모습일까요?
Interesting. Especially in the last couple of weeks with the World Cup. That skewed my soccer consumption.
World Cup
well, it's
soccer,
heavily
okay.
soccer in general. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. And we, ever since they were smaller, we just watch a lot of soccer. And then you see a lot of music. And so if you look through my, things I've viewed, you'll see goal after goal scoring and then interspersed with that with some Bob Marley or something.
But no healthcare? No policy-related content?
I think I use YouTube to learn as much as everyone does too, and relax. But probably my ratio of learning to relax is probably, more 60-40. So you will see videos about, keeping up to speed on being clinically viable in a lot of things I need to do as well.
Do you ever binge watch YouTube?
I think binge watching is interesting because I think of the term in the way of, and I try to teach my kids this around intentionally engaging. So there's a difference between mindlessly engaging and intentionally engaging. So I tend to watch in spurts over time. Engagement, intentional watching allows you to grasp something from what you are viewing and engaging with. It also then allows you to direct what you want to see next. It's an intentional journey. And so for me, I talk to my kids a lot about these critical viewing skills and intentional engagement because that allows you to get both the educational and learning and just developmental components out of the experience.
A lot of AI tools are being added to YouTube these days. In order to maximize our YouTube experience to 100%, which AI tools do you recommend and how should we use them?
We do have a lot of AI tools. One tool that I like a lot is called Ask.
Ask?
Ask, yeah. It's a little button that's like a little diamond button that's down around your video. Because again, so many people, kids and adults in Korea use YouTube for learning, is you can use that tool to get the summary of what a video is showing and teaching, and then also thinking through specific parts of the video that might be important to you. Being able to get the salient points, either a lecture or content or everything is always good for your learning journey.
So if you look at my algorithm, it's very interesting because I use YouTube a lot for my child. So there's a lot of CoComelon, Baby Shark, there's also a little bit of soccer. I love K-pop, so there's K-pop. So my algorithm is kind of like it has a very wide spectrum, but sometimes it's scary because algorithm, I feel like it knows what I want before I want it. I feel like it has some predicting abilities. I mean, do you share that fear, or is this fear something that we can rid of if we actually understood how YouTube algorithm works?
I mean, one thing I would say is the concept of recommendation systems is pretty simple. It's based on what you've seen before. In the YouTube, particularly for teens and kids, another part we put in the recommendation systems is high quality principles. It's principles we developed around like what makes kids better, see the world, learn more. And so that's one thing that makes YouTube different. But to answer your question, it's not that much of a mystery because it's just basically things based on things you've seen before. And along those lines, it allows continue to enjoy the kind of things you're interested in. I often say to folks who ask questions about the beneficial of recommendation systems versus not. My daughter is looking up decorating a house. And she was really looking about decorating her doll's house. If our recommendation systems didn't work well, we could be giving her information about how to refurbish your bathroom. That's not what she's looking for. She wants to know about little Barbie chairs. And so she was learning about, designing and infrastructure in a kid way. And I want her to learn a kid way. I don't want her to think through, tiles and plumbing. Yes, exactly.
So if you want to change your algorithm, what should you do first?
The simplest thing you can just do, because it's based on what you've seen before, just clear your search history. That's a simpler way to kind of reset. One of the things, speaking about, we have this YouTube Kids app. Allows parents to select what channels they want to watch, kids want to not watch. And one of the things that it does, especially for kids, it makes it easier for you to reset what's recommended to your children. And so I might often do that sometimes. She may go on to other things.
Right. Another thing about YouTube is the shorts section, which is highly addictive. I think the algorithm-based recommendation for shorts is literally keeps me up at night. Now, there are a lot of talks about how that could be harmful to the brain.
Shorts is just a medium, like long-form video is a medium, podcasts is a medium. There are all these different ways to consume information. And the challenge is when it gets into a heavy consumption. So once you get into a heavy consumption or heavy engagement, that's when you start to potentially have challenges. And so one of the ways you always want to have balance, and this goes not just to shorts, but just anything in general, especially for teens, there's this thing called the replacement hypothesis. So something becomes challenging for a child when they replace what they would normally do. So if you would normally be outside playing soccer, you replace it with some other activity. You want to know why that's being replaced or displaced. And so I would say that the thing I look at with short form video, with anything, is balance. Balance is always important. And you can always reset balance. So even in the experience you were just articulating, whenever you're uncomfortable with imbalance, discomfort is always a sign of change. It's a good time to just rebalance because we always have ability to do that, certainly as adults.
Right. So we talk about, this dopamine rush when we're watching shorts. Is that a medically accurate term?
I think what people are trying to draw the bridge to there is, sensations or feelings but the real challenge of that you see around the data around, again, shorts or any other, has a lot to do with this concept of dense consumption, heavy consumption in general. There are studies that talk about this thing called a U-shaped curve, heavy consumption, low consumption, and then there's this moderate curve in between. And that's where you tend to get a lot of the benefits is around moderate consumption.
Right. Do you ever fall into that trap of watching too much or spending too much time on YouTube watching shorts? Aimless watching, like you put it.
I, like anyone else, oftentimes my mind will kind of drift away, especially moments when you're kind of bored. And that's why I go back to this idea of intentional viewing. I do it for myself and I try to teach my kids that more. What it means is, how do you have a quality experience? So one of the things that's emerged in the literature about children and screen time is, in the old days, we would talk a lot about quantity of screen time. Now we talk a lot about quality. What does it mean? It means like here in Korea, over 70% of children use YouTube as a part of their homework. So if they're spending 2, 3, 4 hours, that's quality screen time, as opposed to 2, 3, 4, 5 hours that may be mindless. And so really want to think more about quality. And because, again, we're such a big part of the education here, that's important too.
Let's talk about the education part of YouTube. The negative impact of watching, aimless watching too much shorts is especially damaging to the children's brain, the developing brain. How is that different to the damage done to the adult brain?
In general, developing brain is always more susceptible. Overall, in general, kids' brains are developing, particularly their prefrontal cortex. And so that's why at YouTube, we've created these things called age-appropriate experiences for children. So YouTube Kids for younger kids, supervised experiences for 11 to 13-year-old and teen accounts 13, but also to give them age-appropriate experiences so that their brains can develop appropriately in terms of how they consume information, but also have the safeguards around that.
Right. We use the word addiction a lot when we're talking about short form videos or videos. Medically speaking, is that a proper term to use? I feel like we're too cavalier about the term addiction.
We probably are a little bit cavalier about the term addiction.
And I think that YouTube has a little bit of part about how we use certain medical terms in a very casual way that are not casual. Like PTSD, we use it all the time.
Sure.
And I think that is a large part of that is due to information being available to the general public for free. I don't know. I kind of want to ask your opinion on that.
And the question, part of the question I think you're getting to is overexposure to medical information, have we used the terms inappropriately and then have us even overdiagnose concepts in general? I don't know if it is overexposure as much as I would say we need to continue to educate people about health topics. And that goes from, understanding, what really PTSD might be to how do you eat well. So I think for us, that's why we try to lift up the sources, elevate the authoritative sources that can give that information. But I think overall, the healthcare system, not speaking as a clinician, need to do a better job of educating the public about healthcare topics.
And that's what YouTube Health is doing.
That's exactly right. That's what we're about.
Teenagers in Korea, they tend to dine alone. And when they're solo dining, they use YouTube as their companion. There's actually a word in Korean called 밥 친구, which literally means meal friend. So you turn to YouTube when you're eating alone. Does that have an effect on the brain of, let's say, a teenager who's still developing?
I think that you'd want to be cognizant of their overall is two things. Children and adults to have mindful engagement and mindful experiences. So particularly with eating, you also want to be conscious as you're eating around satiation when you're full and all the other things that should go along with an eating experience. And so in scenarios like that, what I again go back to this idea is intentional engagement. Particularly with eating, you want to be in tune to your body signals.
Right. Because I've had that experience. When I'm eating alone, I turn to YouTube. I don't know why, but I watch a lot of mukbang videos when I'm eating, and I end up overeating.
That's why the thing I go back to about quality experiences and being intentional, that goes to the kinds of skills we need to continue to teach our, along these critical viewing skills and intentional viewing and intentional engagement.
That's important. But what about when you're sleeping? Because there are a lot of ASMR content that claims that help you fall asleep.
Yeah, so sleep is important. I think one of the things, and we take this very seriously at YouTube too, that's really important is sleep, especially for young people. That's why we have these take a break and sleep reminders on YouTube to remind young kids to go to sleep. And so, when we think about how we utilize the example you just used around sleep, I would say the thing I would want to switch to is more audio only sleep. We have autoplay that's off by default for younger viewers. Those kinds of things that help make sure that we're protecting their sleep. I am very big, and we are YouTube too, in general, about sleep as an important part, particularly of young people's journeys.
Right. Okay. So you talked a lot about the quality of content. Now, there are a lot of content, and even if it's not harmful in itself and it's very factually based, if it's taken out of context or misquoted or misrepresented and mass produced for views, it could end up being very harmful. So viewer discretion is required when you're on YouTube. Now, when it comes to children, I feel like that's a whole different issue because now you have to exercise parental discretion. How do you do that? You talked a little bit about how you do that with your kids, but we kind of want the full story of how you do that.
Yeah, like I said, co-viewing, watching it together, setting a family media plan. So what is a family media plan is we talk about when and where you may be utilizing YouTube, or YouTube is primarily where my kids will spend time. time, and how to balance that with other activities they have. And so for me, the co-viewing and the media plan are important for exactly what you just mentioned. In the offline world, I want my son to understand how to, an interaction may be good for her versus bad for her, when to avoid negative dynamics, dangerous people. And so we have to teach our kids how to navigate in the digital world, not from the digital world. That's really important because, which is what we all want. And so we, just the same way how, I taught my kids how to ride a bicycle and the things to watch out for. I teach them that in navigating their digital journeys. And so for me, I think of all as well about things I want them to see. So I teach them a lot about intentional viewing, quality experiences, how to understand and discern, and teaching my kids how to spot that is really important.
How though? That's so difficult. Can you give us an example?
And I'll use the television as an example, and then recently my son was watching a commercial on TV, and it was offering free this and free that. And then he turned to me and he said, I don't think they would offer that for free if they weren't getting some benefit. Oh, little guy, you're learning. And then I realized, he's just bridging all of these concepts together. He is understanding that there are commercial dynamics at play in the world writ large. And so applying that all to their online journey is the same thing. So I think teaching kids the ability to just discern, navigate if somebody says something to them in the street or they're walking, how do you discern that dangerous versus not, and avoid those scenarios is important.
Right. So it's not so much about the content, about what it says. It's how you interpret it. And that's what you should be teaching your children.
Critical skills are always important for teaching your children.
Right. So you said critical viewing skills. How can you kind of cultivate the critical viewing skills?
It's recommended what parents doing is co-viewing. And what it means is watching content along with your children. As you are both watching it together, it helps develop this concept called joint attention because you're both paying attention together. And critical viewing skills, meaning as you're watching and your child may have questions and you're talking, they're garnering information about how to navigate a digital space as you're watching it with them. That's this idea of critical viewing skills. It's recommended by a lot of the pediatric societies. Further dubs down into the idea that you are intentionally engaging, you are being able to discern kinds of information that's helpful to you versus not.
Right. You said, you mentioned how to use YouTube in a healthy way. Another issue is moderation. Because if you're on YouTube, it's really hard to, pull back. There's so many interesting content. Algorithm just, keeps flooding you with all the content that you are interested in. And, moderation is hard to exercise even as an adult. Children, come on, right? So what kind of functional changes can we make on YouTube so that we can limit the children's exposure?
Yeah. So, we give parents a lot of choice and options. One of the things we even do is, as a parent, you can set the amount of short form video you want your child to watch. You can set it to half an hour, set it to 0 if you don't want them to watch any short form video through the short form video feed. That's one of the options that we give parents, deciding what's the kind of journey that you want your child to be on. So using, for instance, what I would just explain to you about the short form. So you go to settings. When you're in settings, you just click into Family Center.
Oh, there's this Family Center.
That's where that links all of your kids' accounts. You click on, your kid's name, and then you just, I want to manage your time. I go to time management. Says shorts feed limit.
You can turn it off completely.
Set to 0 minutes. It turns it off completely. So, and then it's saved, and in a couple seconds, that's your child's experience. So that took me a total of 4 seconds to do. So we try to make it as simple as possible. So one of the things I always say to parents is try to automate as much of these, use the tools to automate as much of the process as possible. That way the child doesn't see you as the enforcer, the technology is the enforcer. So they don't, you don't come down and then have to take their phone and do X, Y, and Z. Well, we agreed on this and look, it just kicked in. And so we also say agree on the rules and use the tools because the technology being the enforcer is very helpful.
Is there a way to regulate the type of content shown to your children?
Depending on your kid, but say for instance, if you are going to be using for your child, so it should be in YouTube Kids, there you can actually click into specific channels that you don't want. We have a lot of things built in the YouTube Kids app.
So with YouTube Kids, I feel like it's easier because it's easier to control a toddler than a teenager. Can we get a scientific or medical reasoning behind those those regulatory features?
So the Pediatric Society it was last published, and they really emphasize again this issue of quality screen time, quality engagement, and the reason that is because kids can learn in so many different ways.
Besides, setting the features and the turning on or off the regulatory features, other ways to limit excessive exposure?
Yeah, I think part of your question goes to that, like what are other things that parents should think about? One of the things I often say to parents is this concept of balance. When you transition your kids from either digital experience or other experiences, you can engage them in a similar kind of engaging experience. So for me, a lot of times, what I do is I get my kids like 5 more minutes, and then they'll go for a couple minutes. I'll be like 2 more minutes. So they kind of understand the transition is coming, and then we'll transition to either going and playing soccer ourselves or, engaging in cooking or doing something. But you want to help kids transition as you would with anything,
right.
Even
not just YouTube.
Helping kids kind of transition helps with their self-regulation, but also respects the experience and the journey that they're on and doesn't just truncate it for them either.
You worked at Google as an executive, right? And Google is one of the most influential companies in the world, or around with, leaders like academic leaders, political leaders, policy leaders, whatnot. Do you kind of observe a common characteristic of all these leaders? Is there one thing that you could maybe tell us?
That's why I see a lot from leaders in general. I think it's important to believe in yourself. And the reason that is, when you're bringing your skills to the table, your ability to translate your skills and your ability to interact with a variety of different people starts with your belief that you're capable, able, you should be here. I think that's a very strong leadership quality. People call it self-confidence. I just think it's not necessarily confidence that is it in a belief in yourself. I think companies like Google shine because they pull together the aggregate of small people and their brain powers together to make a difference. Google teaches you a lot about working together because there are so many bright people and there is important work to be done. Collating all of that brightness and energy together and working collaboratively is really important. And one thing that I love about Google is that we allow a lot of bright stars to shine simultaneously, and that's where a lot of cross-functional and working together work. So for me, it's been a learning experience to learn from all these other smart people.
I'd like to wrap up this interview with this question, which is, you've worked with, the brightest people, the leaders, White House, Google, you studied medicine at Yale. Through all the ups and downs and the twists and turns, all the accomplishments and setbacks, what is one life lesson that you learned along the way that you would like to share with our viewers?
Persistence.
Persistence.
Yeah, my dad taught me persistence. It's easy when you recall those experiences sound as if it was all planned and went well, and I did this and this happened, and that's why it happened, and naturally. And there are a lot of things that don't happen naturally. There are tons of failures, particularly in my life, and the only thing that kept me going was both a belief in myself and persistence, and over time that paid off. And so I just often say to young people, the real calculus of whether you succeed or not is whether you just keep going. And that in itself is success. Just keep going. Don't stop. Just keep going. And so that's persistence is my thoughts on there.
Just keep going in life, but stop scrolling on YouTube.
Just keep going and learning. And whether you learn on YouTube or learn in the world, just keep growing. Going and growing.
Thank you. 네, 오늘은 세계 최고의 기업 구글의 임원이자 유튜브 헬스의 책임자이신 그레이엄 박사님을 모시고 좋은 이야기 들어봤습니다. 저희는 다음에도 좋은 이야기를 가지고 다시 돌아오도록 하겠습니다. 시청해주신 여러분 고맙습니다.